Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the September APA Justice meeting. My name is Jeremy Wu. I'll be moderating today's meeting. I want to thank Professor Stephen Pei and Vincent Wang for all their work behind the scene. Now, please let me go through a few ground rules and logistics first. My role as facilitator is to keep the call on schedule, facilitate the Q&A sessions after each presentation, and transition from speaker to speaker and from item to item. I may be rude and apologize in advance if I have to interrupt because time is running out. We're scheduled to end the call at around 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Today's session will be recorded. We plan to make it publicly available. A written call summary will be produced and posted at apajustice.org. We use LinkedIn and Facebook as social media. You can sign up for our newsletter to stay informed between monthly meetings. We have 4 new speakers today. First is Dr. David Zweig, Professor Emeritus of the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. He's also Director of Transnational China Consulting Limited and Vice President of Center on China and Globalization. David is from Canada and has been a China expert for 50 years. He's fluent in Mandarin, and I believe Cantonese too.
No, second.
No, quite is good enough. David will review the history of China's talent programs, analyze why they have generated diplomatic discord, and offer policy recommendations for China and the US. For its part, US government has not been transparent about its investigations and provide actual evidence of economic espionage or trade secret theft in this China initiative. There'll be a Q&A session after David's presentation. Please raise your hand in clicking on the participant's icon to be recognized, or send in your question through the chat box. Our second new speaker is Peter Zeidenberg, defense attorney for Kansas University Professor Franklin Tao. He will follow David to discuss the implication and potential impact of the Tao case under the China initiative. Many of you will recognize that Peter was also the successful defense attorney for Sherry Chan and Temple University Professor Xiaoxing Xi back in 2015. Mike German from the Brennan Center for Justice at the New York University Law School is an invited speaker today, but he regrets that he has a conflict. I will read a message from Mike after Peter. It's about the start of a series of webinars on racial profiling and the China initiative. Our third and fourth new speakers today are Dr. S.K. Low and Anthony Ng. They're taking a break from the 2020 National Civic Leadership Forum to share a few moments with us about the NCLF. SK is President, Asian American Unity Coalition, and Anthony is Executive Director for Civic Leadership USA. We have a full agenda today, so let me at this point look for Crystal. Crystal is the Executive Director of Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, or CAPAC. So do you have any updates from CAPAC that you can share with us today?
Sure. So I don't have a ton of updates. I know, our last meeting we mentioned we're still trying to get additional answers from the FBI and NIH, and we're continuing to engage in those conversations. along with the House Oversight Committee. It's just been very, very hard to get that information. And so, like I said, we're continuing to follow up with them, but haven't really received much traction. So I don't have a ton of updates there. The one thing I did want to flag is that we are in the process of reauthorizing the Intelligence Authorization Act. And so in the House, there is language actually that in section 905, and I can drop this link for you folks in the chat just so you have it. But that would require basically the Ed Case amendment that we were able to get in successfully last year, that would require a report on kind of best practices to protect the privacy, civil liberties, and civil rights of Chinese Americans, who we believe are unfortunately being kind of caught up in some of the intelligence related activity and being profiled or being wrongly profiled. So there was supposed to be a one-time report issued to Congress that was supposed to come this summer. It got delayed a little bit due to COVID, but we're expecting it this fall. And then in this year's version of the Intelligence Authorization Act, at least in the House version, we are including language that would make that an annual report to Congress. So it's not just a one-time thing, but that we can continue to monitor any civil liberties or civil rights implications of the intelligence community and their actions, and how that may impact the Chinese American community. So that's something we're working with, Chairman Schiff and also with Congress, or with Senator Warner in the Senate, to try to push into any final package that we actually pass out of Congress and that sign into law. So I just wanted to put that on your radar because we think it's important that we continue to raise this as an issue with the intelligence community, so it's on their radar, and that we can continue to get reports on an annual basis to Congress. So that is all I have on my end. I don't know if Aurora is on, but I don't think we've received any updates from, I know her boss had also separately sent a few letters to DOJ. I don't think we've received any updates there either. So.
Crystal, do you have any reaction to the recent Fisa court findings, especially in terms of the mass surveillance program was found to be illegal, and the responsible officials were not giving accurate statements, or in fact false statements? Was there any reaction to that? And despite all that, the Fisa program, Section 702, continues to operate.
So we haven't taken a KPAC position on this yet. Individual members have, weighed in. And with Section 702, I know that's unfortunately been one of those issues for whatever reason for a number of years. This is not just unique to this year, but where there has been disagreement and even within the Democratic caucus more broadly, in terms of, whether that section should be authorized or not. And so there's the progressive wing that is really kind of opposed to it, more on a, civil overreach of civil liberties sort of aspect. And then there are kind of more, moderate Democrats, and a lot from the intelligence, end, including Chairman Schiff, who I think there's been this struggle always, even internally with the Democrats. So like I said, I don't have a good answer for you right now, and we have not taken a position as a caucus, but it is a somewhat divisive issue in terms of whenever it comes to Section 702, and we're looking at reauthorization of that. So,
understood. Thank you. At this point, let me transition to David. Thank you for joining us, taking time from your busy schedule, and the floor is yours.
Okay, let's see if this, thank you, Jeremy. Let's see if I can get this to work properly. So you've got the screen? Everybody can see it?
Yes.
Good. Okay, so you stay there, Jeremy, because I may have questions for you. So basically, let me go to the first point. Okay, so my first point, I mean, as I said, it's really nice to be here and nice to see that all of you are working so hard to protect your interests and protect your rights against what I think is a overstepping of American government, as you'll see in point 4. So the historical background, or sort of the broader picture of the background, is really that I think that Americans tend to have no understanding of what it is to have a brain drain, because America has only benefited from the brain drain. But China has had a terrible brain drain. 80 to 90% of its very best talent refused to come back full time. But the Americans don't understand that. Then, so back, beginning in the mid-90s, the Chinese started to have programs back in 1996. But the program that has caught the most attention is the 1,000 Talents Plan. And that was begun in 2008 by Li Yuanchao, who was then the head of the organization department of the Communist Party. And his overall goal, I mean, I've actually met him but looked at some of the documents, and his overall goal was really to create an innovative society through the reverse migration, bring back people who could bring back the technology, but there was no real sense of going out and stealing US technology. Now, I think this number 3 is an important point to make. And it's something that I have to say, and I think it's something that the Chinese American community has to recognize, and at the same time, it's something that the mainland has to recognize, which is there's just too many mainland-born Chinese who are working in the United States, who are on part-time participants, who are abusing the U.S. research jobs, funds, and grants. Now, I know that Jeremy's going to ask me a question, and in part to number 3, we talked about this, and maybe that's an overstatement, and maybe it's not too many, maybe it's just as much as every other group that's doing it, which may in fact be the result. But the US has clearly exaggerated and what I like to say securitized this behavior and using it part of its decoupling strategy. And that if that happens, that's a terrible thing for the world and for US-China relations. And you know, the more, from your perspective, the more this securitization comes into effect, then you all as Chinese Americans really feel the brunt of all that. Now, so why is there a problem? Well, first is, I think that the Communist Party under Li Yuanchao used Chinese Communist Party strategies, and there was a mass mobilization. To a certain extent, you know, the CCP, because it ran this, has still been somewhat engaged in what we would see as mass mobilization. That's just sort of the strategies that they use. And I think universities, though maybe less the universities, some research institutes, some companies, they have been encouraging people to, through financial incentives, to come and exchange and transfer this technology. Now, part of the problem is that there are people in the Chinese ethnic, sort of what I like to call the mainland born researchers. So we're talking largely about people born in the mainland who have moved overseas, in this case to the United States, and they're the people that we're focusing on the most. Some of them have, you know, in 2005, I did a paper, if anyone wants to see it, where it was pretty clear that if you were using second-tier technology, you weren't bringing back cutting-edge technology. You were just bringing back second-tier technology. That was okay, because China had, as of the mid-2000s, huge gaps in its technology base, right? And so you could go to the United States, or I know people went to Japan, and get some pretty good technology, but it didn't have to be cutting-edge, and you could bring it back to China, and you could get yourself a nice job in a research institute, Chinese Academy of Sciences, or a university, but that's ended. Right? We're now talking about all those sort of gaps have been filled. And so if you want to take advantage of your time in North America and go back to China and get a research position, a leading research position, make a lot of money, get promoted, you've got to get your hands on very high tech. And a lot of that high tech is patented. A lot of that high tech is you know, personal property. And therefore, some of these people, to try and get these positions, are engaged in what some could argue is illegal activity. The other thing is the foreign 1,000 Talents program. We know a couple cases, Jeremy and I were talking about it, Moffitt down in Florida, Orlando. I mean, these guys were getting a lot of money and transferring technology. Lieber's the one who's most famous about it. for doing it from Harvard. And that's a real problem too. And that a lot of people in the US take notice of and point it out. Now, a third problem is that Li Yuanchao was really unsuccessful. I mean, on the one hand, for the Americans, it's good, but for China, it wasn't so good, is Li Yuanchao wanted people to come back permanently. That's why he set this up. He was going to be the guy who was going to come in. I've got the Communist Party. I'm coming in, and I'm going to do what nobody else has been able to do, which is bring back the best, right? And he didn't succeed. He could only get 25% of people to come back permanently, full-time under the 1,000 talents, and 75% of these very talented people remained in the United States or remained overseas. Now, and these are the people who have become part of most of the people who are being investigated under the China Initiative or by the FBI now. Now, generally, the United States has some rights to some reason, legitimate reason, to mistrust China. I mean, you guys may or may not agree with me, but I think there's a lot of examples of where China has engaged, particularly the military, in theft, and where there is IP infringement, and this program. The other point is that the program has been quite opaque, and that's a real problem. So the United States, I think, to a certain extent, has a right to pay attention to this. But the Trump administration has gone way over the top, and they believe that economic security is national security, and so they have securitized all of these collaborative research efforts, and that's a real problem. Okay, so now let me talk very briefly about my research team. What we did, and there's much more research than this, and we published other articles on this. This is just, we went out and we collected data on we have 1,400 CVs of participants in the 1,000 Talents, the Chungjung Scholars Program, and the 100 Talents Program under CAS. But for this presentation, I'm only using for this discussion, I'll use some of that anyway. So we have the H-index. We have what is the average annual impact factor of the journals in which they publish. Most of you may know what the H-index is. It's really the number of articles that are cited. Can we, Jeremy, you've got some people who are not muted.
Yeah, please mute yourself, or else we will.
Yeah, thanks. So this is sort of the number and the quality of your most cited papers. So for example, I have about 40 papers that have been cited more than 40 times. So my H-index is 40, right? And then there is the average impact factor of the journal. So who's publishing in the top journals. And then we have data on the annual number of publications. This is easier. Nope, it's not going to let me do it. Okay, so go the other way. Right, so here's the only where I'm going to throw in. So where is this? Just do it there. A little bit of statistics. I'm sure a lot of you can follow it. And the bottom line is really where the triple stars are, right? And what this really shows is that the part-time participants in the 1,000 Talents program. So these are people who have stayed in mostly North America, sometimes in England. But these people who have stayed behind in the place where they've gone to school, but have joined up with the program, they are clearly the best scholars in terms of their H-index, in terms of the impact of the journals in which they're publishing, and also the number of papers that they're publishing. And this is compared to full-time Chungjung Scholars people. So we also have data here also on the Chungjung Scholars. And it's interesting, nobody talks about the Chungjung Scholars, but the Chungjung Scholars also are significantly better, the part-timers significantly better than the full-timers. Come on. So now move. Is it going to move? There we go. Now, another thing we have is we have measures of the quality by country, and the point we make is the US is the major beneficiary. Actually, the US, Canada, and the UK are the three countries that I can show you the data. I just didn't want to throw too many tables at you, but the data are very clear that the US, in terms of breaking it down by country, US and then Canada, and then the UK, but Canada is number 2 and the UK is number 3 in terms of H index and in terms of impact factor. So you can make the argument that the United States is actually doing quite well in terms of these people staying behind. The best people are staying either in the United States or in Canada, which is great for the United States. And, you know, so why are they complaining, right? I also want to make a point that co-publication has been really good for America, that the NIH was quoted in the Senate report back in November of 2019, that excessive co-authorship with scholars in China is a sign of potential technological theft. Well, that's a pretty loaded statement. And in fact, what we do know is that co-authorship, co-publication is something that the scientific community really supports. I won't go into it in detail, but even for the US since 2010, and this comes from a paper by Lee and Hout, that the United States has done quite well, and that without Chinese co-authors, the US would not have done as well in terms of its international status in terms of publications. Is there a problem, Jeremy? Jeremy?
We're fine, no problem.
Okay, that's fine, because sometimes my line crashes, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay, so now the challenge began really first in 2015. You can go back. The FBI did a report on the 1,000 talents, but the real mobilization on the American side, and it is a kind of mass mobilization, really began in 2018 in April, and they've mobilized everybody, right? The FBI went to the National Institute for Health, it went to the NSF, and then it's gone around to universities and has shown and tried to get all the universities and these funding centers or these funding programs to really check out, get involved, look for people, find people. And the two bad things that they could find was one, shadow laboratories, and the other, and I think that this is a real problem, where peer reviewers for NSF or NIH, that they share their information when they're reviewing a proposal for application, they share that information with colleagues in China. But the bottom line is, what the real problem, and it's not such a horrible problem as much as sending people to jail, but it is something maybe enough in some cases for people to lose their grants, is what's double dipping, where you have a job in China, you have your job in the US, and then you take a job in China. And you don't tell the American side that you have that job in China. And then you wind up sometimes spending 8 months, 10 months, 12 months in China, and your colleagues start to say, where is this guy? Right? And they discover that, in fact, he or she are holding 2 full-time jobs. That's not so good. The other thing is, and that's pretty egregious, and that's conscious. The unconscious, sometimes unconscious, is taking 2 grants for the same project, and we can talk more about that, but an NSF, a National Science Foundation, or an NIH, and then also getting an NSFC, a National Natural Science Foundation grant from China, and that maybe there's an overlap. But researchers are often overlapping anyway. But my point is that there's very little public evidence, as Jeremy said at the beginning, of outright theft. And yet the American government is very anxious about that. Okay, so now the NIH, I've been in touch with the NIH people. This was their finding in June of 2020, and you can read down this faster than I can say it, and since I'm starting to overrun my time, why don't you just read down this. The 2 points that I would emphasize One is I'll do something with the total funding, or you can ask me later. Jeremy might want to ask me about the $164 million. And then 5% of people violated the peer review system. So they took the information that they got and sent it back to China. The other thing that I think is interesting is that these are pretty senior people, right? These aren't just postdocs. These are people who are average age is 48 to 59. And so that's something that's really, I think, problematic. And we've had at least probably 60 now people who have resigned because of this. Now, here's where we get the racial profiling issue, and other people, I think, will talk about it, the whole idea of the 1,000 grains of sand. And basically, the belief in the FBI that China, as Director Ray has said, pioneered a societal approach to stealing innovation, right? And that the 130,000 Chinese graduate students are potential spies and agents for the Chinese government. That somehow China does this differently. And the truth is that there's just no data on this. There's no proof about this, that Chinese, that the CCP, I mean, the one thing that the CCP does is it does approach, and we were talking about this, it does approach ethnic Chinese more than it approaches non-ethnic Chinese, right? So if there is a part of the problem here, is clearly that China has approached, the CCP has approached so many ethnic Chinese, which is why the numbers of ethnic Chinese getting caught up in this are so high. This is a study, I guess a lot of you know. Jeremy actually just told me that he was involved in collecting the data for it. This is Andrew Kim. It's a terrific article. You should go look at it. But it's pretty clear from that data that Chinese Americans are getting are being profiled and are getting found guilty more than non-Chinese, more than basically the whites. The pretextual prosecutions is an interesting thing. And if you look at the cases, you will find that very often they accuse the Chinese of doing something, then they can't prove it. But somewhere along the way, the Chinese person might have lied to the FBI or did wire money or something like that, and they get busted. And it really has very little to do with the original crime. So, what should Chinese do? Well, I think, and in part, this is something that I would hope that maybe your organization, I mean, I've gone to the Chinese consulate in New York, and I've presented this, and they said they sent my paper back to Beijing, but they haven't heard back. I think that this is partly based, sort of my view, that we need a dialogue. But I think that what do Chinese need to do? They need to accept the fact, the CCP and the Chinese government needs to accept the fact that, that they're partly responsible for this. In various ways, whether it's the mobilization, whether it's the secret contracts, though we've only seen about 1 or 2 of these. We don't know how many there are. These secret contracts where ethnic, mainlanders living in the U.S., they're ethnic, mainland-born Chinese are agreeing to certain things that probably they shouldn't agree to. We need China to continue to fight cheating in China, right? One thing I discovered is that there's a new program now called the National High-End Foreign Expert Recruitment Plan. And online, it even says that this is the replacement of the TTP. But there's probably going to be very little transparency on that. So transparency is a really important thing in all of this, writing up, as it says at the bottom, when you write an an NSF grant, put on your NSF grant if you've got an NSFC grant. The Americans, clearly, and Jeremy has said this, they need to be more transparent. I mean, I've tried desperately to get more transparency. I was at the relaunching, Jeremy, I was at the relaunching of the China Initiative, and they show this great line going up, but they don't tell you what the axis is, right? I mean, that's amazing, right? Here's the FBI saying, yeah, the number's gone up dramatically, and you don't know what the metrics are on the left side, right? They're not sharing that. And so there's there are things that they need to work more on. Their racial profiling. This pretextual prosecution is a real problem. There is some people who think, and it may become necessary if China's not more transparent, to just say, look, Chinese are going to, non-American citizens are not going to be allowed to make applications for NSF and NIH grants unless China itself becomes much more transparent. And the US should spend more money. Anyway, my last point really is that there needs to be a dialogue, that this is terrible, that all of this, the Trump administration has clearly cut out all of these dialogues that the Obama administration had put together. They've just, they don't go on anymore. I mean, maybe we started at a track 2 level, or maybe you started at a track 2 level, or we get some institutions. I've tried to speak to the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations on this, but there needs to be partners on both sides who want to slow this decoupling and who are willing to represent and take and sort of rebuild this trust. So, as it says on the end, thank you very much. There's my website if you want to see more of what I've been doing on all of these kinds of things. And I give it back to you, Jeremy, for questions.
Thank you, David. That was a very informative and insightful presentation. With your permission, I'd like to share your presentation package after the meeting today, and we'll try to put it up on the website.
Hey, it's public. People can just go to the CSIS, the Center on Strategic and International Studies as well. They've already published it too. And if people want to contact me, that's fine as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, let me follow up. As you mentioned earlier, the NIH grant amount was around 160 million. How does that compare to the total package of NIH grants in general, so that we have a sense of the relative significance of the amount involved?
Okay, you asked me that this morning, and so I went to work, which is fine because I can put it in my book, right? I'm working on a book.
Put you to work.
I'm writing a book about the Haigui, about the returnees. And this whole process, China's search for talent. So I needed to do this, and I followed up with the NIH. Now, so here's the way I calculate it, right? So the NIH reports that they spend about $41.7 billion in grants, in money. That's their budget, of which 80% goes to competitive grants, okay? Now, so that's about, so there's about $33 billion out there for people to compete. Now, if you figure that each grant runs for 5 years, that means that there's 6.7 or $7 billion out there that the people we're looking at are applying for. So you've got the 164 million that is under suspicion of 6.7 billion, right? Which means about 2.4%, right? And I asked the guy at NIH, Michael Lauer, not the guy, I asked the person who runs this program at NIH, Dr. Lauer, what he thought about this. And he said, sounds pretty good. So in terms of money, not in terms of people, but in terms of money, we're talking about 2.4% of the total NIH budget is probably going to people who are somewhat suspicious from and that's pretty small, but it's no different. So Michael also sent me 2 other articles about people cheating on visuals. So they go through all the articles that have been published and they look at the mapping or the photographs that people use or pictures that people use in their research. And about 3% of those they can discover are BS, are not appropriate, are cheating. And then there was another study that he sent me that found that about 4% of people in that category were cheating. So we're really not talking, we're really not talking about an exorbitant, we're not talking about, 20, the numbers sound like, every Chinese scholar, every mainland born scholar working anywhere in the United States is cheating. It's the way it sounds. But in fact, the numbers, if it's 2.4% in terms of the funding that's being misallocated or even under suspicion, that's not a lot of money, right? That's not a lot of money. So that's my answer.
Thank you, David.
Can I say, Michael, though, just to defend the NIH, Michael's view would be that it harms it harms the sort of the faith and the trust, right? But I'd like to know, I'm Canadian, how many Canadians cheat on, living in the United States, cheat on NIH grants, and no one's talking about, the trust in Canadians is way down in the United States because people are cheating on NIH grants. So,
David, I think we probably have time for at most 2 questions. So I'm going to relate the 2 questions to you from the chat room. The first one is from Andy Kim, and he is interested in asking you about your data set, and in particular, how you created the data of 1,000 Talent program CVs, and how it lines up with and relates to the list that the federal government has used in its investigations related to the 1,000 Talent program, whether it's public and whether you have received inquiries from the government about seeing your list and database.
Sure. First of all, Andy, I didn't know that the government had a database that it has put publicly. There's a list of 1,000 talents. Is that correct, Jeremy?
It used to be public, but I think it has been taken down.
By the U.S. government?
In the Chinese government.
Chinese side, yes. No. Okay, so here's what happened. So here's how we put it together. Yes, initially they put up a list. And they put up a list, and my RA back early on went and downloaded that list, and we got about 350 names on that initial list. And then my RA went back online and looked for people, and so we came up with a list of about 500. So we had 500 of the first 1,500, and I'm going to take just a moment to tell you that I was invited to give Li Yuanchao a briefing back in 2012 in Guangzhou. And he was shocked to find out that I actually had 500 of the 1,500 people on his list, right? And I could show him that most of the people were part-time and not full-time, which he actually knew. Then my research, the co-author with me, we used the CCG, the Center for China and Globalization, has a research center in Guangzhou, of which at one point I'm sort of associate guest dean, whatever. And we hired students in Guangzhou to come to that center and to go online and search for everything that they could. Search for university lists, or go into Baidu looking for people who had reports, trying on the western side and then going and searching. And so that's where we came up with about 777 people. But that number is really back to 2013. So that's our problem, which is we can talk about the data back to 2013, but it's, there just went secret. I can talk more about that, but it went underground since then.
All right. The last question I would relate to.
And China and the American government has never approached me for the list. I've had no interaction. I've spoken to various government agents, sort of semi-government agencies, but nobody's ever approached me on this.
The last question I will relate to you is from Jeff of the Science Magazine. He's a reporter.
You're Jeff Mervis. Hey, yeah. Everybody, read his stuff. I saw when I went through and saw who was attending this meeting, and I saw Jeff Mervis, I went, all right, ding gua gua, great. Good guy.
And yes. Jeff's question to you is, do you have any evidence that the double dippers didn't think it was wrong, or if they were encouraged or coerced by their Chinese counterparts to hide their ties, as NIH has alleged?
Well, first of all, I don't know that NIH has actually alleged. I mean, Jeff has, I know, listened to Michael Lauer's presentations and has written a lot about it. So, but I've never seen that NIH alleged that the double dippers, well, we know that there are contracts, right? So yes, to a certain extent, we know that if you're signing a contract, a secret contract, then someone's encouraging you not to share information. And we know that in the contracts, it says one of the things you agree is that you will not share this information with your institute back in the United States. So clearly, sort of like, let me take a step back and say, yes. So we know that from the contracts that has happened. But I can tell you that when I've spoken to the NSF, the woman in charge of the NSF program, she starts from the assumption that that they just make a mistake, right? And that they really just, that's the assumption. And therefore, they go out and they do a lot of propaganda, right? A lot of publicity and say, look, you can't do this, don't do this, don't do these mistakes. I've never met anybody or interviewed anybody who said that, yes, I knew that I was cheating. I think the contracts would be the most important thing that shows that there is a sense of awareness. I'm sure as well that, there's so much money. I mean, part of the problem there's so much money to be made in the biomedical, with so many Chinese people worried about cancer and the wealth on the middle class. These hospitals, they just want this technology. And I'm sure that some of them are not, are encouraging people, bring it over, shh, don't tell anybody, we'll give you a position, and that's that, but I don't have proof.
Thank you, David. Again, it's tremendously informative, and there are a few other questions, but we'll try to relay it to you after the meeting, and
Sure.
If you could help to answer them, that would be great. At this point, I'd like to transition to Peter. Peter, I did an introduction of you earlier, so let me go directly and basically ask you to give an update about the Tao case and the general implication about its implications of on the China initiative situation. Peter, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Well, with Franklin's case, Franklin Tao, the KU professor, that we filed a motion to dismiss, and the government just replied on Friday, and we will be responding to that within the week, and we have a hearing on that on October 1st. What's really frightening about the Franklin's case from our perspective is that in that case, the crime, so to speak, and they made 10 felonies out of it, is that they claimed that he incorrectly filled out a conflict of interest form with his university. That is the sum and substance, at least in our view, of what the case is about. They allege that he took a position with the Changing Scholar in China and with Fuzhou University. Our position is he was in discussions with them clearly, but nothing was ever finalized. He never took the job. But in any event, that's not a crime. It's not a crime to work in China, to work at another university. And the only crime that they've came up with is they said, well, this conflict of interest form wasn't filled out correctly, and it was shared with the National Science Foundation and the Department of Energy in terms of the grants, and they looked at it and they gave you the grants, therefore you were defrauding them. It's a very convoluted legal theory. We think it's unprecedented, and we're trying to get it shut down. I can tell you that this is an epidemic that's going on in the scientific community now. I'm getting calls, almost on a daily basis from professors all over the country in a similar position who are being questioned. Most of them are NIH affiliated. Franklin was NSF and DOE, but NIH is on a mission. And I mean, I've been helping out a professor at a university who actually set up a Shanghai sister campus for his university in the United States. So he was in China on behalf of his university for 5 years, setting up a sister campus, and is now being investigated because they said, what were you doing over there? You know, you became a China scholar. And everything he did went through his university, through his American university, and he's still under the microscope. His grants are being held up. He's having to let people go out of his laboratory. So it is, in my view, just out of control. And, you know, it's a very frightening time, I would think, to be a Chinese-American scientist in the United States, or ethnic Chinese scientist in the United States.
Thank you, Peter. We are a bit short of time. So any follow-up, I think anyone who's interested, let's try to do it after the meeting. And anyway, most of the activities for APA Justice actually happen between monthly meetings. At this point, I would like to ask Gisela, because she has to attend to another Chinese-American scientist situation soon. And therefore, Gisela, would you give us a quick update on the anti-racial profiling project from the Asian American Justice Center?
Thank you so much, Jeremy. As John and I mentioned, we are launching in the very near future our anti-racial profiling project. I just want to highlight that our concern as a civil rights organization is really the human impact. So we're concerned with how Chinese and Asian Americans are essentially becoming collateral damage as a result of harmful policies and practices. And I want to highlight the fear and apprehension that has created in our community, with over 860 participants joining a Know Your Rights webinar that we coordinated with Stephen, Jeremy, and other partners. It is very important from our viewpoint that people have appropriate resources and access to legal counsel. As part of our project, we will have Know Your Rights fact sheets and resources available specifically on the racial targeting of Chinese scientists and researchers sometime before the end of next month. We continue to refer impacted persons to attorneys. We will also have a donation page available for anyone who is interested in supporting our work to combat and prevent the racial targeting of Chinese and Asian Americans and immigrants. We have been in touch with organizations who just wanted to understand our work more and have learned more about this particular issue. We're always available to speak with you as well. We are here as a resource really for the community. Related to Peter's discussion, we had also previously submitted an amicus brief with the Asian Law Caucus in support of Dr. Tao to oppose the government's increased efforts to target and racially profile Asian American scientists and researchers. We provided context of the DOJ initiative that broadly investigates Chinese American scientists without any indication of wrongdoing, and also provided the history of the government's scrutiny of Chinese and Asian Americans here in the United States, regardless of how long they have been here or their citizenship. We are very frank that we don't deny that there are real security threats out there. However, we do believe that the FBI and other government agencies shouldn't rely on racial profiling or gross generalizations that would create suspicion about an entire race or ethnicity. As the government has provided a response requesting the court deny our motion, we're considering all available options and we'll be making an informed decision on appropriate next steps. Please let me know if you have any questions regarding our work. Like I said, we are an open resource here for any organizations and impacted persons who need assistance.
Thank you, Gisela. let me at this point transition to the topic about the Brennan Center. Mike German is the invited speaker for this topic today. He's a fellow and also a former FBI senior agent at the Brennan Center for Justice at the New York University Law School. Unfortunately, Mike has a schedule conflict and regrets that he's not able to join us today, but I'll be reading a brief message from him, and that is the Asian American Justice Center, whom Gisela represents, APA Justice, United Chinese Americans, and the Brennan Center for Justice at New York NYU Law School are partnering to produce a series of webinars to raise awareness of a growing number of federal investigations and prosecutions targeting Chinese American scientists and Chinese nationals in the US under the umbrella of the China Initiative. The webinars will include speakers from Chinese Americans, Asian American advocacy organizations, civil rights groups, academia, as well as experts from science, scientific and legal communities to highlight the burden this pattern of investigations inflict on targeted individuals and communities. The first webinar is being scheduled for the second half of September, meaning the next 2 weeks. It is designed to provide policymakers, journalists, attorneys, and community advocates with an overview of the China Initiative investigations and the efforts civil rights advocates and the scientific community are making to protect the rights of those harassed and falsely charged under this discriminatory framework. The Franklin Tao case and the China Initiative are the catalysts for the first webinar. If your organization wishes to join in the planning and organization of future webinars and the topic of racial profiling and social justice, please let Mike German and I and Stephen Pei know after the meeting. We're looking into the feasibility of forming a working group. Thank you. So that completes my reading of Mike's statement. At this point, if I don't see any particular questions related to this, then I would like to transition to Dr. S.K. Low and Anthony Ng. And they are taking time from the 2020 National Civic Leadership Forum. And this is a fairly quite impressive event that lasts more than a week. Is pooling many communities together for over a week. So the forum has started. I'm very thankful for both of them to spend their efforts to build coalitions and joining us today. So SK, are you on? I see Anthony. Anthony, would you start?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you for giving us like commercial time. This is a 9-day with the theme of the power of we. It has been our effort to put a coalition of AAPI around the country focused on civic engagement. And this year is exciting because half of the track involve a lot of the young civic leaders around the country. That is the most exciting. They taking a charge, they take on the issue, and they take on the stage and like talking to each other. So I hope you could join us for some of the events. It has so many issues. In fact, on Friday, we even have a healing day with 4 different ethnic chefs from Martin Yan can cook, an Indian chef and then an Indonesian chef to do some of the, besides the serious stuff, we want to have some fun among each other. So I invite you all to join us, and you can shoot me an email if you need the link. And thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Stephen, for putting this discussion together. It's very informative, and I hope this is like somewhere we can develop a dialogue that is civilized enough that we can inform each other. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Anthony. Do we see SK on?
I don't see her there. She might still busy with many last minute stuff. So I'll just pop in and do whatever you need me to do. I wasn't, but if you need any link or any information flyer, I'm happy to forward afterwards. Just shoot me a quick chat.
Anthony, maybe you can also describe both the organizations in terms of AAUC, UA, right? Asian American.
AAUC, yeah.
AAUC.
Okay,
and then your organization, yeah.
Sure.
And what is your, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Civic Leadership USA was established in Washington, D.C. in 2013 with the focus of training and connect civic leaders around the country. And we are served as a catalyst. So we serve as almost like a small private foundation, using the Civic Leadership Forum as a mutual platform to bring out local leaders and local politicians to create a dialogue and build relationship, in addition to a national public service internship program that we fund. As for AUC, this is actually 3 years ago from a conference in Alaska that I participate and hear about this idea. So we support AUC, which is Asian American Unity Coalition, from scratch, and with like the starting, I would say the founding board involved 15 different ethnic group and organization, and start that dreaming to make it accessible to everyone to have the American dream. But 3 years later, we're now at this stage, we getting some track, and the good thing is like we're getting the second generation participation in a very like I would say enthusiastic and also taking in their space, like taking ownership. So this is a very good sign for us to also invite more other group, because we are grassroots approach. We're not top down, so that we want to have all this community build up and strong, so that they can support all you do the national agenda. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Anthony. At this point, I'll invite David. You have a question for Peter. You have to unmute yourself. David, unmute yourself.
I am.
Okay.
Unfortunately, didn't discuss in greater detail. How do you see, or why do you think that the NIH, I mean, why do you think that they're on a, what did you say you used?
Mission,
right?
They, you know, I'm going by reports, public reports, that they issued 1,800 letters, I think, to various institutions. That's the number that comes off the top of my head. It was something in that vicinity. And so these institutions, it's their lifeblood. You know, every research university, you know, this NIH funding is their lifeblood. They're terrified of losing this, and they are turning on their scientists, and they don't want to take responsibility. You know, they have not once said, oh, by the way, we've never trained our researchers. We've never trained them. You know, the simple fact is, you know, these talent programs, they have two flavors, as you mentioned. I think, you know, they have you go there and you move there for 5 years, and you have others that are for 3 months, 2 or 3 months per year, type B. The scientists are professors who have 9-month contracts.
Sure.
So they go to China in their summer vacation. A lot of them do not think that what they did on their summer vacation is of any consequence. They are
Well, they're supposed to get money. Part of the university.
That?
I'm a university. You know, it's U.S. has a 9-month salary, right? So they're supposed to go out and earn money in those 3 months.
So you know, there may be a lack of disclosure, but it's not because of any intent to defraud. They simply think, why is this an issue? Yeah, and in fact, they often do disclose in other various ways. You know, they have emails. They'll say, oh, look, you know, as you know, I'll be in China all summer. They'll send emails and saying, you know, it's 12 hours ahead. I'm here at my lab. Call me then.
Do you find that those are the, do you find that those are the people? I mean, we can take this offline, I think, Jeremy,
Yeah.
but I just would like to establish this sort of, that I'd like to talk to you more about this. But your point about turning on the researchers, the Institute's a good example is actually, what is it, A.M. Anderson. The report that, maybe it was even a report that Jervis that wrote, that Mervis that wrote, that talked about how they made a calculated decision. And they quoted the president of the university that he made a calculated decision and said, look, you know, we're going to, this was the case of Wu Shifeng, that we're going to make this decision to fire her or to get her in trouble, because otherwise, you know, the university might lose its funding. Yeah, anyway, it's a problem.
Well, we are approaching, fast approaching the 1 o'clock timeline. And if I may, at this point, do a couple house cleaning topics. APA Justice has also been very strong on the 2020 census. As of this morning, the household response rate to the 2020 census is 91.3%. So please remind your relatives, your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors to complete the census. This is really important, especially the timeline for that may be reduced from, move from the end of October to the end of September, which is only 2 weeks away. The second item is that our next meeting will be on Monday, October 5th. It's always the first Monday of each month. So with that, any last comments as we are passing 1 o'clock? Stephen, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I want to respond to David's question. I think if we talk about Wu Shifeng's case, before the NIH sent out a letter in the fall of 2018, Wu Shifeng has been put on leave of absence since December 2017. So that means before NIH got involved, she has been on leave. She was cut off from her research team for a good part of a year already. And at that time, right after the president of MD Anderson, Peter Pisters, released the email file of 23 researchers voluntarily to FBI in 2017. Regarding to your summer 3 months, in university, our job is to disseminate information. So therefore, even I'm paid for 12 months, I'm entitled to do 20% consultant and get paid. That's our job as a professor.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I wasn't disagreeing with that. You know, the interesting thing in Hong Kong, we have, and maybe in the British system, we have a 12-month salary, but we're allowed 1 day a week to spend pursuing a separate, consulting, and we just have to report it. So yeah, no.
In American, it's not everybody is for 9 months, because you can take 12 months salary in 9 months period. On paper, you are still paid for 12 months.
Okay.
You're on payroll for 12 months.
Andy, did you want to add a question? If you do, you have to unmute, and this may be the last question for today.
Unmute.
Oh. Stephen, can you help to unmute?
Yes, I'm asking.
No.
Oh, there he goes.
Is this, can you hear?
Yeah.
Yes, now.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's, Peter, Peter and David, you both raised really important points. Especially, I think, the British system, it's 9 months. The US system, that used to be a professor, then even if you're getting paid 12 months, then sometimes it's on paper that you're actually getting paid for 9 months, but you're electing to have that spread out over 12 months.
Right.
But the other thing that I wanted to point out is I think that you're absolutely right that MD Anderson does not have a very good reputation right now with respect to protecting its employees from the federal government. But I've also been dealing with some of my clients with some universities that have taken a different approach. And so some universities are actually being very aggressive. I think that the public reports about MD Anderson are that there was no warrant to ask for the emails for all of those researchers. The FBI just knocked on the door and said, please. They were very polite, and so they handed them over voluntarily. But there are other universities that have insisted on seeing some kind of paperwork and getting a warrant before they roll over. So there are good guys out there.
Well, just adding to that, I've spoken to the president, the vice president of university responsible for research, and if you're a state university and you get a lot from the state, then the senator can put a lot of pressure on you. I heard from, I don't want to say which state, but I heard it from one of the state universities. We were at a meeting and I was asking him about, are you guys pushing back? How do you feel about all of this pressure? And he said, we've had, and this is actually one of the senators who's known to be pushing these kinds of investigations. I guess it's a Republican, conservative Republican. And he said that the university's under terrible pressure because the senator said, look, you gotta, we're giving you the money. We're helping you get the money. You better, you should do that. And he's still fighting back. So I've met 3 presidents back in December who were fighting back.
Okay, I'm not a very good timekeeper, apparently. So we are quite a few minutes past 1 o'clock. So I thank all the speakers and I thank all the participants. This is an extremely useful, valuable, informative, and production meeting. So we will continue, and those who want to connect, please let us know. Like I said earlier, a lot more happen between monthly meetings than during monthly meetings. So let's continue. Otherwise, I thank you very much and have a great week. The meeting is adjourned. Bye-bye.